What is a Gypsy Jazz guitar? Hello, I'm Michael from Gypsy Jazz Australia and my website is www.gypsyjazz.com.au. And I did start this business because I wanted to make it a little bit easier for everybody to get their hands on the good guitar picks and guitars that us Gypsy Jazz players like, but also primarily because I just love playing and I wanted to get more people into the genre. I wanted to help grow this style of music, and it's a lot of fun. And so part of what I'm wanting to do is also make it easier for people to get into the style of music. And so this video today, what is a Gypsy Jazz guitar, is part of a series I'm wanting to put together, which is called A Beginner's Guide to Gypsy Jazz. And it's just to help people make that transition from being a guitarist in another style of music to be getting to see what it's all about, see whether they want to do it or not, but also to help them with that journey if they decide to. And I just want to bridge that gap a little bit, just because I did find it myself, and I must stress I'm a beginner. I only started playing in March 2020 myself, and I just love it. I love playing. It's so much fun, and I was very lucky to have been introduced early in the piece, or to have met Miranda Douche, who then was able to introduce me to some of her other students, and that just made the whole flow much easier. And then we can go into the sort of the bigger jams and that sort of stuff, and mainly getting a handle on the rhythm. But today, just with respect to the styles of guitars, first and foremost, I do want to say, if you have a guitar and you can't afford to get a Gypsy Jazz guitar, just start playing. Get to know the music, get the biggest, thickest, meanest pick you can, the biggest steel string guitar you can find, and just have a good time. There's people I see at jams all the time that aren't playing a traditional style of Gypsy Jazz guitar. I will say the Gypsy Jazz guitar obviously does make it easier if you're trying to get that authentic sound that we're all forever chasing. Historically, and the easiest answer for what is a Gypsy Jazz guitar is, it's the style of guitar that Django Reinhardt was playing back in the 1930s. Django Reinhardt, you probably know, was the founder. He's their god, and all the music comes from him in the style. And there is something romantic about picking up a guitar that is built in the same style that Django was playing back then. They are a beautiful instrument to play, there's no doubt about it. The style of guitar that Django Reinhardt was playing in the 1930s was a Selmer Macaferi. So Selmer was the instrument maker, so he was a musical instrument maker, made a lot of woodwind instruments, I believe, but he also went into partnership for a period with Macaferi, who was a luthier and designer and innovator at the time. The original guitar had a D-hole, which you may recognise as being a very gypsy-looking guitar. So this is the D-hole shape. The Macaferi guitars also had a resonator initially built inside of them, which was one of his innovations to help with sound projection and to even out some of the distortions. And so he continued making and working in partnership with Henry Selmer Music Instruments for about 18 months. And then after he dropped out, Selmer continued making guitars on their own steam and did several innovations. One of the interesting ones to mention is that from what I'm understanding, the guitar cutout that you get that sort of gets you access up into the frets above the 17th and etc. was an innovation of these guitars. I think it was certainly a novel idea at the time, if not one of the first guitars to actually have a big cutout as such. So they actually continued. One of the changes they made was to introduce this style of they called it an oval hole. So the two styles of guitar, if you want to know a little bit about this, this is in French they call the big D hole that I was showing you earlier, they call that the grand boucher, so the big hole, and this one they call this the petit boucher, which is the small hole. So sometimes you'll see when they're discussing guitars these sort of names mentioned, and it sounds a bit ominous, but it really is just to do with the sand hole shape. Now, I have got my good old trusty Martin with me. I love this guitar, and I used to play it a lot before I got into Gypsy Jazz. And I guess that what I'm sort of trying to show you is the differences between the guitars, and so therefore you'll get a bit of a handle on what a Gypsy Jazz guitar is all about. I guess probably the main differences that you'll see between the designs, besides the hole, is that the Gypsy guitars will generally, some of the nylon string ones, but generally will have this big metal tail piece, which then goes into a bridge, and the bridge is floating. You can actually take that out, and there's usually a gap, or always should be a gap, underneath the bridge, which allows the soundboard to vibrate freely. And along with that tail piece, it does give it a different sound to, say, the trusty Martin, which is built into a fixed bridge halfway down. Oftentimes and it depends on the maker, of course, but oftentimes you'll find that the Gypsy Jazz guitars will also have a pliage, which is that gentle arching. This particular one is built to be arched over the bracing, but your classic Selmers used to have what they call a fold pliage, which was, you'd get to a point here and you'd actually see this piece at a very visible angle take off down towards the tail. And this sort of gave the bridge in action a little bit of height, but I imagine it would have also affected the sound considerably as well. They generally have also, compared to say the trusty Martin here, it has a different thickness of the soundboard. And generally, from my understanding of it, the Selmer guitars had quite a thin soundboard. And it was all about projection and sound and noise, but also I think with the style of music, it allowed the players to create that really percussive sound, because you've got to remember Gypsy Jazz didn't have a drum, and the guitar is actually replacing the drum as part of the music. So it can be a little bit difficult to get that proper, you probably heard the expression of rhythm for rhythm in Gypsy Jazz is la pompe, and there's several different styles of rhythm that you will play with Gypsy Jazz, but they generally will involve a percussive element of it that does replace in some ways that sort of snare drum, or sort of keeps the rhythm going. They didn't play with it generally with a drummer back in those days, and that's obviously the sound we're trying to create. So just comparing the two is, if you're looking at this particular guitar, say as opposed to the Martin, it's very easy for me to get this, that sort of really percussive sound, whereas with the Martin, you'll generally find that it's a little bit sort of more muffled and not as easy to pick up, sort of playing exactly the same note. The other thing to do, just to remember too, if you are going to start learning to do la pompe and try to get the rhythm patterns down with the style of guitar like a big dreadnought, you really do want to get a big solid pick. I'm not trying to sell anything I've got here, but we do have these sort of like the picks that Gypsy Jazz players use. I mean, the most famous one is a Wegan 3.5, and she is quite a big busty babe, and it certainly does create that tortoiseshell sound that the players used to use back then. So even with using that, you're still sort of not getting that. It certainly happens a bit more, doesn't it? But as opposed to playing with, I used to play with quite a soft pick, and I mean this guitar, this is the one. I mean, classic Pink Floyd. I think this is the guitar it was made on. It's a beautiful instrument, and this is not me knocking a classic Martin in any way, because I love this guitar. But again, trying to learn la pompe on it with a thin pick and a dreadnought guitar, as opposed to the other guitar, which is more your classic sort of Selmer style. With the big thick pick, you really do get that percussiveness happening. Particularly with rhythm, I did find it much easier once I got into a good pick, and certainly once I got into a gypsy style of guitars. And there's many different types and many different sort of qualities about them, and some of them will work better than others. But like I say, if you've got a good dreadnought and a thick guitar though, a thick pick, I don't think you can go too far wrong to start off with. And like I say, it's all about getting into the music, but if you want to know the differences and why they talk about a Gypsy Jazz guitar, there's a little bit of background for you. I hope that helps. And I do look forward to jamming with you all soon, and I hope this helps you with your journey a little bit. All the best. Bye now.